Okay, so good morning to everyone. So as mentioned, Joanne Laidlow from NEMO, Radio Communication Officer. So I'm here representing Ms. Forbes, Ms. Michelle Forbes, as the director of NEMO. Now we are asked to basically just bring an overview of what would have happened during that time of burial, affecting us. Now, it was good that the president would have done all of that introduction of what happened on that day, so I'm not going to go through when the storm came and all these things. If you notice, I said the 4th of July, but she went into everything that happened, so I'm not going to go through that. We know what happened for those who were here. We know what we went through. A lot of us were, I won't say staked out, but we were at NEMO. We were in the Emergency Operations Center, and there basically is where we were for majority of the passage of the hurricane. And then after, myself, being one of the first persons who had to actually venture down to Union to carry some supplies, was on that boat going down to Union the next day. It was an interesting experience. I might be able to share that. So we're talking about the impact of communication, more so the internet, the need for it as we are in this whole disaster management. And in disaster management, we know that communication is key. First, communication is key in everything. Because relationships and so forth, if you don't have communication, you have problems. Same thing. So if you don't have the means and the mode to communicate, we're going to have issues. And even though you can put a plan together and have the best disaster plan in place, if you don't have the means and the mode basically to communicate, you have problems. Because we say beneficiaries now, but the persons who are affected would not be able to get the information. And more so, we are dependent on the internet because that's how I would say, as a society, we have come so dependent on it that that's the only way sometimes we look for information. Hardly anybody really listens to the radio anymore to get information. And sometimes you're not really getting much information from them when it comes to certain things. So we go to the internet. You go to Facebook, you go to Instagram, you go to, TikTok, whatever they go to these days, that's what they go to. So therefore now, as NEMO, we have to make sure that we can send this information via all of these mediums as possible so that persons can receive the information. All right? So I'm just going to go quickly through things that were affected: the Emergency Operations Center, the seismic monitoring system was also, and we could even mention that a little, because recently we had a message going on about the thermal increase and so forth. And right. But what I would say to that, and it will come up, is that there have been some issues because of damaged fiber due to digital running aerial, right? And because of this, it has caused intermittent problems with sending and receiving the monitoring information over to UAE Seismic in Trinidad. So that, I'm not saying digital hasn't been working tirelessly to make sure they got it up and running. But at the end of the day, it created some problems where physically the team had to be going and check in and then sending the information because of the lack of. All right? So, going through, I said we're not going to go all this. We had a widespread problem due to the hurricane passage, due to the wind and so forth. And because of some of our topologies and how the makeup of our country and the placement of our towers and all of these things, we know we have some problems. So the high wind would have damaged a lot of critical infrastructure, and it would have affected our ability to do certain things. So it's just talk about intermittent connectivity. So I will just go through and say, well, we know all of this information from what was mentioned from CDMA's report, and it would have mentioned about the damage to various infrastructure, especially on Union. So we know we didn't have any communication after the passing of the hurricane with Union at some point. It was basically dead air. We were in the EOC, we were speaking to them before, we were talking and communicating because we have what we call the ECN, the Emergency Communication Network, which is under my current supervision. which is where we have radios set up across the island. And we are able, it's a digital network, and we are able to use radios over this network and speak to persons right down to Union. So because of this network, we were able to communicate with the various community groups because they are part of our support system within the communities, making sure to check in with the community groups and, just making sure preparations are in place, that they understand what is happening, they have the information on what is coming, and so forth. So up to the point of time before the hurricane passed, we were talking, we were communicating, whether via radio, via WhatsApp, whatever the case may be. But as soon as that hurricane passed over, it was dead air. It was nothing. We had no way of reaching to understand what was happening. We saw the effects of what was happening on the island. We went outside and we saw, roofs blowing off and so forth. We saw this, so we know if this is down that side, things bad. So here we were trying to reach and we can't. And at some point, it became a challenge within the EOC because here we know we're having issues because current went and then internet started giving problems, and we were unable to send information, even to update the media houses and so forth at some point. Because while we have a redundant system in the sense that we have both Flow and Digicel, at some point, both were lost, right? And even though we had the radio system, we could only reach to a certain point. Because after going down, we realized that the towers were damaged, the repeater and everything was damaged, so therefore we couldn't get to them. The thing about it, if you were maybe out at sea, at a certain point, we can still reach you. But once you go in close to the land, you lost signal. So within the EOC, we started to have some problems because now persons are like, we're not getting onto our organization because within the EOC, you have representation from the different sectors, all right? And in that, they have to now communicate whatever information is gathered in the EOC and send it to the various sectors to make sure that they keep their persons informed. So whether the police, need to go out and move somebody from one place, whether the shelter managers need to understand what is currently happening and we need to bring persons to the shelter, we were having that issue now. And sometimes when people can't communicate, they start to get frustrated. So we had the issue now of being the team that has to manage, starting to get frustrated because now here we becoming more modernized, I would say, because the government system is one that is a lot of paper. So you have a lot of documents and reports that you have to write in triplicate and do all that, right? But now we were trying with ITSD to have a system that is more robust and easy to access data, doing up database and all of these things, but doing a shared document. So you're doing a shared document without a proper setup insurance, that you will say, internally. So you have persons trying to share data, but you have no internet. So you understand there was some, even though we are trying to move, there now was some issues that were being created because of the lack of internet, all right? So there were delays in information sharing regarding public safety and resources and so forth. Now, what I was mentioning about the monitoring unit was that because of the fiber being damaged, now you have the problem of information being sent intermittently. So the Seismic Monitoring Unit Resource Center, the Seismic Resource Center in Trinidad normally would get the data real time from all of the different units around. But because of the fiber being damaged, they realized they won't get any data. So now the team would have to physically either go up to the Soufrière or go down to Rose Hall at where the monitoring site is. All right? So even though Digicel, yes, I would say they worked on it and they got it back up and everything, at least still it caused a delay that could have been problematic. So we are showing how important it is to make sure that, we have such a robust system that at the end of the day, we don't miss on critical information that can save lives. All right? So what happened during that time was that, at this point, CDMO would come in to support because, when you have such an event, that overwhelms sometimes our capacity, you require some support. So CDMA came in with their, what I would say, their support system. And their support system is having, the ability to reach out if your network is down. So they came in with the Starlinks, they came in with, solar panels, they came in with battery backup generators and basically were able to set up by the EOC and give us connectivity. So at that point where we were having intermittent issues, when they came in and they set up, we were now back online and able to run without any issue after basically for that period of time. So then we realized, this was something that was important, and I think the word got out, and then after the government went and got, Starlinks to send down and so forth, and we heard about all of this. But it was due to CDMA coming and realize, we don't have a backup for if Digicel or Flow goes down. You may have a satellite phone, but you can make so many calls. At the end of the day, if you can get onto the internet, you can still reach out quicker to more persons and faster. At the end of the day, we realized this was important for us to have as a backup, so that at least if anything happened in an eventuality, that we can get back up in a quick time. So this was done. Now for the ECN, which is our Emergency Radio Communication Network, we realized too, even for that, we need a backup for that also. Because at the end of the day, towers would go down when you have a category 5, 4 passing through. So what do you do then? How do you get a system backup? So there are different things that we are looking at. So there's this repeater system, because our network is actually a Tate network. It was installed by Flow, or one of the service providers. So they would have installed it, but it's the government's network. So it's owned by the government. At the end of the day, we also have a mobile unit. But the problem we have, and this is how you see when we don't make sure that everything goes the way it's supposed to go, this is what will happen. So we have a mobile unit. Now the mobile unit is a standalone, which means if we dispatch the mobile unit to a location, it is only going to serve the area. It's not going to get back into the network. And this is due to, if we have to connect the mobile unit back into the network, it either needs two things. It either needs a hardwire back into the Gov network that is around the island so that it can get back into the network, or it needs Flow to set up a seriously expensive system back on the back end that we would have to pay for even though we don't use, to basically keep this up and running. Because now they would have to do something on their end to have a way of us coming over their network back into our network. And basically that would be a solution that they would create specially for us. And they already told us it would not be cheap. So another solution we probably would have to look at is something like this portable repeater, but finding a way that we make sure that we can go back into the network. Because you want that, if you have to, let's say for instance, use unions for instance, cut off. You can't get network back up, but you can get there. You can take a repeater, put it up, and get back into the network. That is what you want. But to do it, we need to find a solution that would not cause us to have a budgeted cost in the end that would kill us. Because it seems like a satellite phone. You have it, you have to pay subscription. You use it, you have a high bill. But it is needed. How do you maintain that? How do you sustain that? Okay? So I think as we go forward, it's just that we have to look at as many robust ways of actually seeing how we can continue to make sure that even though the internet goes down, we have other solutions to support. But also, even for the internet, making sure that if one service provider goes down, or both of them go down, we have another solution that can support what we need to do in disaster management. Because at the end of the day, disaster management is about saving lives. Possible property if possible. But it's more about saving lives. And getting the information out there, communicating that information out there as quickly as possible is what is required. And that is something we're always pushing. We are always pushing and talking to the service provider. I know Mr. Anthony is here. I must say I have a link to Cable Wireless, not Flow. I actually worked at Cable Wireless for a while. And Mr. Anthony was actually my boss. So I have a kind of understanding and appreciation for the organization in a certain extent. But also, I think in some cases, the service providers need to do better. And they need to do better in the sense of understanding that life is important. And if life is important, you must, even as a service provider, trying to do things to gain the revenue that you need to keep the organization going. Look at how you can support that part of, that whole overall disaster management. Because, just like how Helder say, it's everyone's responsibility. It's the same thing for disaster management. If you don't support it, if you're living in a community and you get the information, you might be the only person who might have internet at the time, and you get the information and you don't share it with your neighbors, then is it NEMO's responsibility to come there and tell them? We always say everyone, whether it's government personnel or persons in the community, are part of NEMO. And in order for us to continue to communicate, we have to understand this, because while we will try to send the information via all of the modes possible for persons to get it, there are still persons within your community who may not get it. And the question I would ask, what are you doing to support this system? So just like how the internet was created so that we could network and get, information shared on various platforms and be around network in the world, it's the same how we can make sure that we network and get any information when it comes to disaster management out. We're still going through it. So while I'm here, yesterday I was in Union, and Union they're still doing work there. There's a long way to go. I know the service providers are there. I saw Flo on the island yesterday trying to run fiber back to homes and so forth. And I smile at this because I hope at some point we become a society or a nation that is not just responsive. Because I find a lot of the time we are always trying to respond to events instead of actually preparing and making sure that we mitigate certain things. Because now they are doing fiber to the home in that area. When I was working in Cape Morales 12 years ago, they sent us on a training to do fiber to the home. It's now being done. So, so I'm just encouraging, and I'm saying I'm not giving any blows to the service provider. I know they're doing what they can do, but at the end of the day, I still think we can do better. And if we collaborate and work together, bringing all the resources that we have at the various sectors, we can continue to properly manage disasters, support. I mean, it's not just NEMO. Yes, NEMO is the coordinating office, but at the end of the day, there are different stakeholders that make up this system. So, yes, we were heavily affected by the internet. Yes, we got support from CDMA to bring that back up, and then by the service providers. But at the end of the day, we realize how important the internet is. If we don't have it, it can create problems even for disaster management. I think that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ledlow. And again, it highlights the point we made earlier, how important it is that we have constant communication, even in a disaster. And, we take it for granted when it's all working. But when it's not there, we appreciate how valuable it is. And the tendency is always, once in a while you may get a volcanic eruption, a hurricane, so we're not going to spend money on that. But when lives are at stake during a disaster, we appreciate, this was worth the investment. And it's a decision all developing countries need to make. And more so, I don't want to go into something else, but we have the effects of global warming, so we are more likely to experience severe hurricanes. the volcanic eruption is ours. We own that. But this is, again, it highlights the importance of the internet, because even though we might be performing our respective roles in trying to save lives, unless we can get information out, we are handicapped. So that's why for this forum, again, we want to hear from one of our carriers, internet carriers. What was your experience, and maybe how we can improve on that going forward. Resilience, that's the theme of this forum. So just in case, by way of housekeeping, you wish to use the bathroom, you go out the front door, make a left, and then another left, and you should find the bathroom. And we may have, are we taking questions now, or? So we go straight to flow. Okay, so please hold your questions or any comments, suggestions you have for the open forum. Because at this time, we want to hear from one of our carriers, Flo, and he is being represented, sorry, if I can find it here. See the importance of the internet. He is Anthony Balcom, sorry. He has had 25 years total in the industry. And in the last 2 years, he's been responsible for mobile operations in Grenada, St. Lucia, and St. Vincent. So join me in welcoming Anthony Balcom.
Justice for telling us